Call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of September 8th. We'll note that all commissioners are present. The first item of business for your consideration is the order of business. Are there any changes to the order of business? Hearing none, would there be a motion to approve the order of business?
I'll move.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Next item of business then is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss?
Mr. President, I'll move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mrs. Dukart?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to tab 4. And the first item that we have there is to receive the July 2009 financial report. So, Mrs. Johnson.
The mic's not on.
I think we're having trouble with her mic. Seems to be working now, so.
Okay, we'll begin with the monthly fund cash balance report. The balance in our general fund is $3.5 million at the end of July, which is $43,000 more than last year at this time. And our wastewater backup fund cash balance is $66,000 at the end of July, with claims of $7,500 paid out thus far in 2009. Our account and investment balances report shows the balances held in our checking and investment accounts totals $29,925,000 through July. Of that amount, $12,690,000 is in our general investments, $11,820,000 is in our pension funds, $3,485,000 is in the Dickinson Future Fund, and $1,720,000 is in our general checking and money market accounts. Our revenue report, with 58% of the year completed, our total general fund revenues equal $5,244,000 through July and are 77% collected compared to budget. Of that total, our current property taxes equal $2.8 million and are 96% collected. Our building permit revenue is $67,000, which is 56% collected compared to budget and about 4% less than last year. Our highway distribution tax revenue includes a one-time payment of $495,000 to be used for additional road repairs. Our oil and gas production totals $80,000, which is 37% less than last year. Our leases, easements, and royalties totals $102,000 and is 59% less than last year. And our other intergovernmental revenues include $117,000 of snow removal assistance monies we received from the North Dakota Department of Emergency Services. In our enterprise funds, our water distribution fund revenues total $1,775,000 and are $104,000 less than last year. And our solid waste fund revenues total $1.2 million and are $50,000 more than last year. In our expenditure and capital outlay report, our total general fund expenditures equal $4,663,000 through July and were 62% expended compared to budget. And our enterprise fund expenses together totaled $2,822,000 and were 57% expended compared to budget. In our additional reports section, our sales tax schedule shows we received $304,000 of 1% sales tax and $152,000 of 0.5% sales tax revenue in July. Our sales tax revenue is up 12.7% for the year. In our sales tax breakdown, in the 1% sales tax fund, we have paid out $321,000 in job creation and senior program subsidies and $1 million towards the Badlands Activity Center. In the 0.5% sales tax, we have paid out $597,000 towards the West River Community Center bond. In the hospitality and occupancy tax breakdown, we have paid out $965,000 from the hospitality tax, which includes $800,000 to the BAC, and $95,000 from the occupancy tax through July. In our street projects breakdown, this report includes street, sidewalks, and trail projects. We have expended $884,000 of these funds through July. Those are some of the highlights of the financial statements. As an additional note, our general fund use of cash was budgeted at approximately $98,000 for 2009. We reforecasted our revenues and expenditures earlier this year due to expected shortfalls in oil revenues and increased expenses from several winter storms. We made recommendations at the May 4th Commission meeting that would help alleviate some of these shortfalls, which included using funds earmarked for street projects towards snow removal and postponing the proposed animal shelter. Since that reforecast, we have seen a slight increase in oil revenues, but incurred additional expenses due to the tornado. The North Dakota Department of Emergency Services has reimbursed us $117,000 in snow removal costs, and FEMA will be reimbursing us up to $90,000 for expenses incurred in the first 72 hours after the tornado. Including those tornado expenses, we are now forecasting a $46,000 use of cash for the 2009 budget. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Are there any questions on the 2009 financial report?
We're forecasting a $46,000 use of cash for 2009 in its entirety.
Correct.
And I think at one time we had looked at maybe double that.
We had budgeted
Original budget.
$98,000
Okay.
use of cash originally.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Well then, Chair would entertain a motion to approve the report as presented.
So, second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote on the motion. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Ms. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Item B is going to take a fair amount of time, and as are probably items C and D, and we have a public hearing scheduled at 5:30. I'm wondering, Mr. Soren, could you use this time to do your Public Works report?
Yes, I could, President
Okay.
Johnson. Just have a couple of reports in here, the one being the code enforcement report. Just to point out a couple of issues with the new building permits, or items there. We'll see commercial structures at 16, which is comparable to last year's. The commercial side seems to be tracking fairly well to where we were last year. Where we are down in our new permits is in our single family. We're down by 20 permits compared to where we were last year at this time. In the past, it kind of seems like it kind of goes hand in hand. If commercial seems to be doing really well, residential seems to be behind a little bit, and then we see that switch. With our additions and alterations, you can see those numbers are showing that we're up this year compared to last year, with a total of 136 permits compared to 110. So with that, if there's any questions regarding the code enforcement report, I'd be happy to try and answer those.
The, being down in single-family structures, that's pretty good. That's down like about 40%. Is there just less demand for housing right now?
I think right now, what we're seeing is there are several of the houses that were built last year that are on the market right now. There's still some that carried over with late permits last year, I believe, that they were working on this year yet and finishing them up. So we haven't seen those. Likewise, I think the demand must be down some because a couple of the contractors that were from out of town don't seem to be doing the numbers that they were doing last year on the housing market. There is talk out there about new subdivisions with one of the developers that's got some pretty big plans and trying to get some land started, but of course that would be a next year process by the time they get the subdivision developed and started. So there's still some talk out there. There's still a lot of commercial talk going on too, that we're reviewing plans and working that direction too. So, but single families definitely slowed down for us.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for our engineer? Anything else you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, just a couple other comments, I guess. Board of Adjustment minutes in here, if there's any comments on those, I'd take those as well, or questions. But our project update, I guess I'll just bring you up to date where we're at. Our chip seal project, last week we completed this year's chip seal project, and things seem to be going really well with that project. This week, we started the repair work. I think Friday we got Broadway done. We're finishing up with Sims, 9th, and working on the alleys now, and tonight or tomorrow they'll be done with those projects as well as the new project for this year on the chip seal side. They've come in, done everything that we've asked, so we've been really pleased with the contractor's performance and how they stepped up to our concerns about the project they did last year. We have started the Urban Roads project, some of the concrete work up on 21st, which is a mill and overlay project. We're pushing the timeline on that with some new construction, mill and overlay work, but we have started that. We've also, this week, we're expecting the slurry seal contractor to be in town working on Highway 22 South and 4th Avenue East. So we've got a lot of things going on right now, a lot of activity around town, and at this point, things seem to be going pretty smoothly for us. The weather will continue to hold out. We should end up with some good products here.
Thank you, Mr. Soren. Any comments or questions for him? Okay. Well, I think it's 5:30, so we'll go to the timetable agenda, and 5:30 is a public hearing regarding 2009 Development Impact Fee in Washington 4th Edition and Phase 2 and 3 of the 23rd Avenue East. And Mr. Soren, is there anything you would like to add about this impact fee project before we open it up to public comment?
Yes, President Johnson, this is, there's 3 projects tied up here. Washington 4th, Phases 2 and 3, which is a water sewer being one project, and the street curb and gutter being another. And then 23rd Avenue East, which is a water sewer installation project. The Washington 4th projects comes to a total of $255,772 that we'll be looking to assess back to the properties. And 23rd Avenue East comes to $57,596 that would be assessed back to the project. Those numbers are half of what the total project cost was. We did have special assessment commission meetings regarding this, and they are recommending approval of these assessments.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Soren. With that, then, we'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone that wishes to comment regarding these assessments may do so. Just step to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Is there anybody that wishes to comment? There's no one that appears to comment, so therefore we'll declare the public hearing closed. And Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions regarding this item?
I have a couple of questions. I believe as a city, we have a maximum amount of impact fees that we'll carry at any one time.
Yes, 2 million.
2 million. Can you tell us where we are with respect to that, just roughly?
Roughly, we're just a little over 1 million right now.
Okay, that including
Yeah.
these projects?
With everything that's been approved.
Okay, then, can you give us a sense about the state of development? What's the status generally, say, in the Washington 4th project? How many houses have been started?
I'm not going to be able to give you a firm number. With the Washington 4th part of this, I do know, for the most part, it's probably 80% started on 6th. 15th is probably about 50%, which are the two streets that are involved with this
Homes that are actually
development.
started.
Yeah. 23rd being a water and sewer, that tied in to 2 lots that were built on, that shops are there now. And I think there's a total of 6 lots that are involved with that one.
Mr. Soren, in the monthly financial report, is there an area that we can look to that would tell us just what our total special assessment is? The same question that Mr. Commissioner Jackson asked. Where would we find that in the report? And as these assessments are collected, where do they show up as revenues?
I don't believe they're in the report. I know they're spelled out as projects, and the revenues would go back to those projects. I don't know if Ms. Fisher or Ms. Johnson can help us with that.
I guess we do have a question about the financial report after all. So.
They would actually be a separate fund, so the revenue lines do not show in the report. The only place you would see them is the cash balance report. 457 is the fund number. That would show the balance. It's a negative number right now as we're waiting for.
So that's not, we won't find that on any of these pages in here then?
Correct. That's basically general fund and enterprise funds in those reports.
That's, I think a pretty important number for us to look at, plus I think we should understand, how well we're doing on kind of the repayment of this, because in effect, it's a loan, right? So maybe you can look at, you and Mr. Kessel and Mr. Soren could probably look at including something like that in our packet.
Yep, we can either add it to the special report section or possibly add it as line items in both revenue and expense reports.
I guess wherever it makes the most sense, but
We will do it.
thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on this item? There is a resolution in your binder, resolution number 15-2009. If there are no other comments or questions, the Chair would entertain a motion regarding that resolution. We can either pass it or defeat it.
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner.
move to approve resolution number 15-2009.
Second.
We have the motion to approve and the second. Other discussion. Any other discussion?
It it's good to hear that we're at 80% and 50% as far as development. I think there's room, as we see our single-family permits go down, there's room for maybe a little caution, or at least a little scrutiny with the whole topic.
I think I need to clear up. I think I misspoke on that because I was on the wrong street, I believe, as I'm thinking about it. 7th Street and 8th Street were the last development impact fees. That project, I believe, is at 80%. 6th Street, I don't believe we're that high, but I don't know that number for sure. I do know that 3 of the lots in this project have already paid their special portion, which is the $36,000 that was on. They already came in and paid that portion of this back. But I think 6 is probably lower than that 80% I spoke.
When you answered Mr. Jackson's question about the amount of impact fees that we've approved, and you said a little over $1 million, I wasn't clear. Will that include this roughly $312,000?
Yes,
Okay, including this, so.
including all of them that we have approved at this point, which some of those are going to be projects that we've already assessed. Some would be projects that have approved that haven't come before you for assessment because they're not completed, as well as these.
Okay. And then I guess I have another question for Mrs. Johnson. I hate to make you walk all the way up here, but the report you're envisioning showing us would, I assume, include the original amount that we special assessed and then the amounts we've received and the balance due the city on these special assessments. Would that,
We certainly can.
is that correct? I mean, is that kind of what you're thinking about? Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. You should sit in the front row, you know. Other comments or questions? Okay, I got lost here. Didn't we have the motion and the second already? Okay. Any other discussion? If there's no other discussion, we'll vote. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Okay, now we're going to go to item 4B, which is a 2010 annual appropriations ordinance, and this would be consideration of the first reading. So again, Mrs. Johnson, are you leading off, or is Mr. Kessel here and presenting this? Mr. Kessel? Okay.
Thank you, President Johnson. Commissioners, I'll wait for the okay. The PowerPoint is ready. The 2010 budget includes a few changes from last year. We intend to talk to you tonight about a reorganization, streetlight utility, some enterprise funds, estimated effect on the property tax, retirement plan funding, pay scale adjustments, information technology, and the fee schedule. We'll be, as you mentioned, we'll be asking for first reading this evening. The intent is to hold a hearing at the next City Commission meeting and then second reading at the first Commission meeting in October. So that's the budget ordinance schedule that we currently have. The first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the reorganization, and that might be a strong word for it, but we are looking at ways to flatten the organizational flow chart for the city of Dickinson. That flattening of the chart is done for several different reasons, and the primary one is improved communications. There's 112 plus full-time employees that work for the city of Dickinson, trying to achieve the goals that the City Commission sets for us on an annual basis. In order to make sure that communication flows up and down that organizational chart, the flatter it is, the less distortion there is in that communication, either up or down. So that's the first reason to look at organizational chart changes. The second is the flexibility. The decentralized authority, what that really talks to is that managers, we pay them to make decisions on a daily basis. With decentralized authority, they should be empowered to make those changes and be trained to make those changes quickly and appropriately. The third is that we're moving more and more to a knowledge-based worker, meaning employees, because of number 2, are exercising more authority and they want more responsibility. So it is, as we ask them to be, or excuse me, as we empower them to make the decisions, that's what they're asking for. So that the people coming to apply to work for the City of Dickinson want that responsibility, and this is a way to give that to them so that we can become an employer of choice. The fourth reason is it requires a smaller commitment to manage the staff that we do have, and this is probably most evident in the Police Department and Public Works Department. Those two departments specifically will have less managers and more frontline workers in them than they've had in the past. So it lowers the ratio of staff to management in both of those departments rather significantly. And the final reason is improved customer relations through quicker decision-making. Again, if you empower that employee at a initial level of the organization to make decisions that they deal with on a daily basis, if they're engaged with a customer or a resident and they're empowered to make that decision, they can do so right then and there, issues resolved, and they can move on. That is both empowering for the staff themselves and, of course, for the resident, because they don't have to wait with the perceived bureaucracy that often occurs in government organizations. At our last budget meeting, you were provided with a thorough document that engaged each of the changes in the departments that we're looking at. I've not included that in the packet today since you've received it previously, but I would entertain any questions that may have been generated between your review between then and today. The resource commitment, I should make a comment on that, number 4. In the police department specifically, we're looking at eliminating 4 different lieutenant positions, but then adding back 2 captain's positions. And as you approved as a commission, we also accepted a COPS grant that will add another officer. So in the end, the police department's staff budget is lower because of the resource commitments that are applied to it. Same in the public works. The idea there is to eliminate a director level position and combine those departments. Well, they'll actually be split into 2 different departments. One will be taken on by the new public works director and one by Mr. Soren in engineering. So that's all again explained in the document that you've received. So if there's any questions, we'll move on to streetlight utility. This is one of the changes that is also in the budget for this year. Streetlights are an expense that hit our general fund on an annual basis. The expense amount is about $300,000 in 2009, and we're expecting a similar amount to be due in 2010. Our general fund revenue is mostly made up of property taxes, or at least this fund is, and 70% of property in the city of Dickinson is non-taxable. Those people don't, or 30, which means that 30% of the property in Dickinson is not taxable. They don't participate in those costs. Well, streetlights are something that every resident in Dickinson receives benefit from, and you could, of course, argue visitors to our community benefit from. So everybody who travels upon our roads, either by vehicle or walking or otherwise, benefits from having streetlights. By changing a portion of the expense to a utility bill expense, you are broadening the tax base. The idea is, rather than have 30% not paying, if we use utility accounts instead, that will broaden the tax base or of payers, the number of payers, which should lower the overall expense on the property tax, the people who are paying property taxes, that's 70%. So there'll be a $185,000 that will be generated through utility bill collections rather than through property tax collections. The average expected charge to a residence is $2 a month, and to a commercial property is $10 a month. The commercial, these charges are based on the size of the water meter that you have, are being charged on your utility bill. So that's a fairly significant change in the way that we're creating revenue to pay for that expense account. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take those on now. And then I can go and sit in the back row if that entices any questions from the commission. If not, I'll turn the presentation over to Ms. Johnson.
The budget for 2010 shows no use of cash from our general fund. There are two enterprise funds that will require use of cash. They're the wastewater fund and the stormwater fund. The use of cash is related to a one-time capital cost in both of those funds. Our property tax revenue includes a $100,000 increase for new construction coming on the tax roll, but no increase for existing properties. We have also factored in an estimate for tax abatements due to the tornado. We have added a streetlight utility. As Mr. Kessel mentioned, this utility charge will cover part of the cost for electricity and repairs to streetlights. It is recorded as a general fund revenue because the expenses are recorded to engineering, which is a general fund department. In the preliminary budget you received in your packet, we show the streetlight utility as a separate fund. After consulting with our auditors, they advised us to record it as a general fund revenue. This change has been made to the revised ordinance that you received tonight. There is a funding increase of $265,000 to our defined benefit retirement plans. This amount was not funded in the preliminary budget you received in your packet, but has also been updated on the revised ordinance. Some additional highlights include a 2% pay scale adjustment for employees, the addition of an IT department in our general fund. In 2009, the commission approved hiring a full-time IT staff person. The payroll expenses and additional IT-related maintenance costs have been moved into this department. In total, our general fund budget has increased 4% over the 2009 budget. In our 2010 fee schedule, we have two new fees. One is the forfeiture of cemetery lots of $250, and it's found under cemeteries on page 1, and a group center child care facilities permit of $25 annually, found under the fire department on page 3. We also have rate increases. Those include a $50 increase to our lot mowing and snow removal fees. Our sewer base charges were increased 50 cents for residential accounts and $1 for commercial accounts. And our sewer usage rate is increased 25 cents per 1,000 gallons. We have also increased our solid waste collection rates 5% for both residential and commercial accounts. One change that's not shown on the fee schedule that we would like to recommend is to suspend the 25-cent per month fee for the wastewater backup reserve for 2010. Due to the small number of claims we've received in the last few years and the healthy cash balance mentioned in the financial report, we feel we could suspend this fee until additional funds are needed. Those are all of the highlights I have for the budget and fee schedule. Are there any questions?
Tina, I'm trying to remember, when we had our last budget meeting, we had the dollars out there on the pension fund, and I was thinking we were higher than what we are here, and I meant just the part, we had it broken into 3 parts, as I recall, and one part was what the actuary thought we should pay for this lump sum provision that our people have the right to take. The other part was for the decline in the market, and then the first part was for just kind of ongoing expenses. And I thought the ongoing was at $248,000 or $250,000, and
It would have been $348,000, and that would have been for the city plan.
okay.
We also have the police plan and a volunteer plan as well. The police plan was, I believe, around $130,000, and the fire plan was $8,300. And so this $265,000 funding increase has been prorated amongst all three of those plans.
So this includes the police plan, too, then?
Correct.
Well, see, here's what I'm remembering. I thought we had agreed that we would fund Part A, in a sense, and that we were not going to fund Part 2 because of the recovery in the market so far, and we were not going to fund Part 3 till we got a opinion from another actuary. And then in meeting with Mr. Kessel, he said that as you really dug into the budget, you found that either we were duplicated on some costs that day, or that when we discussed that impact, we missed something, and that actually we had additional revenues that we could then put towards the pension. So I thought this would be a larger amount. What am I missing?
We originally, in the first budget presentation, funded A and C of the things that you discussed. We did not fund the market losses. So when we pulled out C, which is the lump sum payments, the original amount we had expressed to you as a commission was actually lower than the amount we could pull out, because we didn't include the police pension fund and the fire pension fund. So that's the difference between what you saw the first time and this document today.
Okay, I'm still a little confused.
Yeah,
So
me
is the-
too.
Is the Part A, what you had called the Part A portion of the retirement, is that in the budget
Yes,
in total?
yes.
And it's just a different amount of the Part C, what we had looked at in the special meetings?
Correct.
Am I saying that right? Okay.
correct.
Yep.
Okay.
The part that you were presented under C was only the city employees portion. And there's actually, as Accounting Manager Johnson stated, there's 3 retirement accounts. And so you didn't see the effect of pulling off the police and fire pension accounts. That was the found money that President Johnson, you and I spoke about.
So in effect, in this $348,000 number, we must have been doubled up someplace.
Close. It was 400, I forget the exact number. When we removed all 3 pension funds, wasn't it 470? 400 and something amount.
Correct.
Because I fully expected to come into this meeting and see the 348 plus something on top of that.
Which is what we have. The 348 is in there. This 265 is in addition to that. But that's being split amongst the 3.
Oh, this is in addition, this is not the total.
Correct.
Okay, what is the total? 265 plus 348?
We'd have to add all 3 plans. So 348
It would just
would be around $500,000 for the 3 plans was the original funding, and then we're adding 265 to that.
I guess I know the others are capable of grasping this much quicker than me, but I think what you're going to have to show me at the next meeting is a slide that, say we'd have years 2007, 2008, 2009, and projected 2009 and 2010 budget, and just show me what our historical contributions have been to all 3 plans, and so I can look at the trend and then know, okay, I have a better understanding now. This is, the 265 is increased to what I believe would be the 348.
Right. Correct.
Okay. You have to remember, when you deal with commissioners, you have to make it simple. Okay, I'm with you. Are there other comments or questions here?
Mr. Mayor, are we still seeking the second opinion of the actuarial?
Yes.
We are. We're trying to identify a company who can do that for us. We don't expect that that will be done or even have a company engaged before second reading could take place. So so you will be presented that second opinion once obtained, and be able to make a decision if you want to make a budget amendment based on that recommendation. But that'll be in 2010 some point.
For the benefit of the public, could one of you restate what we're doing with property taxes on the revenue side this year?
Go ahead.
We have no increase for existing properties. We are including a $100,000 increase for new construction that will be coming onto our tax roll. We also do have a $10,000 decrease for the tax abatements that we expect to come through from the tornado.
Okay. But the streetlight utility is new,
Correct.
and if we were not doing that streetlight utility, then that revenue would have to come from someplace else, probably property tax.
Correct. You notice there was a 4% increase in the overall expenses in the general fund, but we're not charging that all back to property taxes, and the streetlight utility is an excellent example of how we are able to do that. Good point, Commissioner Jackson.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, well, thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Since this is a first reading, I will ask if there's anyone from the public that wishes to comment regarding this proposed ordinance. If so, you can step to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Is there anybody that wishes to comment? There's no one from the public that wishes to comment. Certainly invite comments from any other city staff or commissioners, anything. Would there be a motion then regarding first reading?
Mr. President, I'll move for first reading,
Second.
ordinance 1372, our annual appropriations for 2010.
Okay, we have the motion and the second to approve first reading. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next is the 2010 fee schedule. Mrs. Johnson covered that in her presentation. Are there any comments or questions regarding that fee schedule? Mrs. Johnson, one thing I wasn't clear on, if we pass the resolution as it's now worded, would that include the 25-cent reduction for the wastewater backup fund?
The fee schedule that's in your packet has the 25-cent fee on it right now, so you would have to make a change to the
We'd have to make
resolution.
a change to it, okay. So if we follow their recommendation, we would amend or pass that fee schedule with that modification to it. So, any comments or questions? Hearing none, is there a motion then regarding this item?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
you're looking for a motion for the first reading ordinance?
No,
No, excuse me.
resolution number 16-2009,
16, 2009?
right?
Yep.
Okay. So move to approve resolution number 16, 2009.
Second.
I have to ask Mr. Steiner and Mr. Frenzel that, we would be adopting the fee schedule as presented in the packet. They've recommended one change to that, and that's the elimination of the wastewater.
That's correct. 25 cents.
25 cents, is that part of your motion?
Yes.
Mr. Kessel, you,
Commissioner Johnson, it's not the elimination, it's the suspension of that fee. We want to maintain the fee, we just don't want to charge it in 2010.
okay, the suspension.
Yes.
Yeah, that's part of your motion, part of your second.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Rita, you're going to sort that motion out? Okay. We have a motion, the second. Any other discussion on it? Are you guys clear on this side of the table, what you'd be voting on? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and vote on the motion. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. We're going to move to item 4D, which is a presentation regarding residential exemptions for property owners and builders. And Mrs. Zepp will make that presentation. Mr. Kessel, anything else that you would like to add here?
I think, President Johnson, after the presentation is made, I may have a comment, if I could reserve them for then.
Absolutely. Okay, so, and for our Commissioners' considerations, no one is asking for any action tonight. This is informational for the public and our behalf, so you need me to move again.
Yes, please. Okay, I will be talking a little bit about state law changes that affect new residential dwellings and exemptions for property owners and builders. New legislation has been passed and was effective August 1st of 2009 regarding the new residential exemptions. The City Commission had adopted a resolution in August of 2004 for residential construction. You are now given the option of keeping the current resolution or adopting the new legislation for 2009. The current resolution, number 20-2004, Section B states that up to $75,000 of the true and full value of all new single-family residential property, new condominiums, and townhouse residential property, exclusive of the land on which it is situated, shall be exempt from taxation for the 2 taxable years subsequent to the taxable year in which construction is begun, if the following conditions are met. The special assessments and taxes on the property upon which the residence is situated are not delinquent. The first owner after the builder resides on the property, or the builder still owns the property. The exemption should be applied for prior to the time construction is commenced. The overview of Senate Bill number 2247, which became law, which is for the property owner. I've broken it down into 2 columns. The previous bill gave the property tax exemption for new construction up to $75,000, which is what we currently have. The newly passed gives the property tax exemption for new construction up to $150,000. The previous was available to the builder or the first owner after the builder, and the new is available for all new single-family and condominium and townhouse residential property. Third, the exemption is available for the first 2 taxable years after the taxable year in which construction is begun. That was the previous. The new is the exemption is available for the first 2 taxable years after the taxable year in which construction is completed and the residence is owned and occupied for the first time. The previous was on the exemption, is on the building only, as is the new, and the previous special assessments and taxes must be current, as should the new. The new is also stating that. This exemption is discretionary. The city is not required to offer this exemption or may keep the current exempt amount in place. However, a new resolution must be approved as the existing resolution expired on August 1st of 2009. As noted in the previous slide, number 3, it stated that the construction is completed and the resident is owned and occupied for the first time. That is one stipulation that cannot be negotiated by the city, and that must be in the new resolution. A governing body may limit or impose conditions beyond the state requirements. For example, the city could grant an exemption of $75,000 for 2 years in lieu of the maximum of $150,000. Or another example, the city could grant a 1-year exemption of $150,000 in lieu of a 2-year tax exemption.
Could we also grant like $100,000?
Yes, you could. You could, right. The state just gave the $150,000 as the max, and you could do anywhere in between. You could do the 1-year or 2-year. If adopted, some restrictions the assessment department would like to see implemented is, the previous statute required that the residence be owner-occupied. The new law does not require this. If Dickinson does not want to allow single-family homes used as investment to receive the exemption, an owner-occupied phrase should be in the resolution. And we also would like add a requirement that the deed transfer date be used for completion date, as that would give us some consistency in knowing when this exemption starts on these properties.
I have a question. So your request, if we do this, is that it be owner-occupied? I mean, that would be your recommendation?
Correct.
And tell us why you favor that recommendation.
I guess that, you're looking at the I probably should say I don't know if I have a one way or the other, a preference. It's just that I feel the exemption is meant for the property owner, the one we're dealing with right now. So if you have somebody that, possibly builds and then rents it out, because I'm going to get into the builder's exemption after this, but if they would rent it out, then they would be also getting that exemption. It's not benefiting, well, yes, it is benefiting the property owner. I guess I'm not sure I have a one way or the other to, it's just a matter, if they're going to be using it as an investment, I guess we need to decide if we want to allow them to receive that exemption as investment properties for a single-family, property owner.
Jan, in the past, was it that when they got the building permit, is that when the exemption started?
When construction was begun. So the minute they dug the hole in the ground, poured the basement, and started constructing, that's when the exemption began.
So the difference now would be, once the deed is passed, that's when it would start? Rather than
Correct.
say if somebody started digging the hole in October this year and didn't complete it, and they didn't have it occupied till next year in October, that's when it would start then?
Correct. It'd be for the full 2 taxable years, where they used to just get a partial for the 1 year and then the full for the next year. So they're trying to benefit the property owner in that respect by giving them the full 2 years. And I will be getting into some different examples with that also here.
Mr. President. Mrs. Zent, so for clarification of how we're doing it now, the first 75 for 2 years, the builder starts with that hole in the ground, 75,000 is exempt from January 1. Let's say that's the date the hole goes in the ground. If he completes it in 9 months, September 1, and sells it at that time, he's used up 9 months of the 2-year exemption,
That's correct.
correct? So the new owner comes in, they must understand that they don't get the full 2 years exemption. They got 1 year and 3 months.
Exactly. That's
Okay.
correct.
And now we're saying, or I should say, if we adopt the second part, whatever limit, 75 to 150,000, we're saying the builder would not get an exemption from the time he puts that hole until one is completed. But once that property is sold and the new owner, then they get the 2 years.
Under this,
Under
under
the
this,
new legislation.
this new legislation for Senate Bill 2247.
Okay.
Correct. There is another Senate bill for builders also.
Mhm.
But this would apply to the property owner.
And to add on the new legislation, they want to exempt, if a builder kept it for investment to rent out as rental property, there's no exemption whatsoever on that property. Under the new
Right now,
legislation.
yes, that's
Under the
correct.
new legislation.
Under the new,
Right. But right now, a builder could bill it with his intention of keeping it as rental property. He's still getting the 75,000.
until he
Exemption.
sells it. Right, it would
If he
pass on
keeps
to
it
the,
4 years,
it's for
rental
the
property
builder or the
sells it,
first
he's got
owner.
2 years exemption.
Correct, the current you're talking about the current,
Yep.
yes.
When we have a home under construction, how do we assess that property, or do we assess it during the construction period? Is just the land assessed, or do we assess for a partially built building?
It is assessed as of February 1st. That is our assessment date. So if that property, they took out the permit, they haven't started anything as of February 1st, for example, in 2009, it would just be the land value.
Okay.
But if it's 50% done, it's going to be on the land, and then that 50%, or whatever percentage it's done as of February 1st.
Okay, thank you.
On the next Senate Bill 2239, now this is applying for the builder. New single-family residential property may be exempt for the year which construction begins and the next 2 taxable years. The exemption is on the building only. The property must remain unoccupied and owned by the builder. A builder is eligible for an exemption of no more than 10 properties in a taxable year within each jurisdiction. Special assessments and taxes must be current. A builder qualifies as an individual who builds his own property, and it can be exempt up to the true and full value of the building on February 1st.
So, in this case, this is a different Senate bill. In this case, there is no $150,000 limitation. If they're building a $400,000 house and we had this in place, you could exempt that full $400,000 for up to 2 years as long as it's unoccupied.
That's correct.
So if they rented it out, the exemption would be off.
That's correct.
Another question I have on this 2239, I noticed the handout in here really was an amendment. I'm assuming what we saw as the amendment turned out to be the entire bill, though.
I'm sorry, it was a new,
You included the legislation for both 2247 and
Okay.
2239. 2247 was the entire bill. 2239 said it was an amendment, and I'm assuming what they did was whatever was there before was amended out completely, and they had new language, and that is the entire bill. Is that?
yes, it is.
Mr. Coley and Mr. Kessel?
Right.
That seemed-
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Mrs. Zen, I'm reading this again on 2239. Is there really a potential for a 3-year exemption? It says the taxable year in which the construction began and the next 2 taxable years. Does that mean the potential for 3?
You could, yes, it could be if, depending on, obviously, if you put restrictions or limitations on it, but it could be possibly a partial year, and then on to the next 2 taxable years. Depending on, how, I guess, when the permit is taken out, and as of February 1st, what our assessment date would hit there. I mean, you can think of a dozen scenarios what would be happening, but it's possible it could happen. If they started, mid-year or, but it depends on if they basically sat on it, they're still gonna get what those 2 taxable years, chances are they're probably gonna just be paying on land as of that February 1st. Depending on when they started, I guess. Again, this exemption is discretionary. If the city is not required to offer this or may keep the current exemption in place, a new resolution, again, has to be approved because the previous one expired with the new laws being put in place. A governing body may limit or impose conditions beyond the state requirements. For example, the city could allow the builder only 1 additional year after the completion of construction instead of 2. The city could limit the number of new homes to something other than 10, say 5 homes, and the city could set a cap amount for the exemption. If adopted, the restrictions the assessment department would like to see implemented, the builder must complete an inventory sheet listing up to the maximum number of homes. A copy of a paid tax receipt should be attached for each property seeking an exemption as the law requires taxes be current. and if a property sells during the course of the year, the exemption is prorated to the date of sale and another property cannot take its place. How could Senate Bill 2239 and 2247 work together, assuming that the City of Dickinson adopts both the exemption for the builder and the first owner? And how many years could this property ultimately remain off the tax rolls? For an example, we are looking at a builder constructing a $225,000 home. I will have a few scenarios following, showing what we might encounter with this exemption. The first scenario is the builder begins construction in 2009. He completes it and sells the property in October of 2009. The land only would be taxable for 2009. There would be no benefit for the builder. The buyer would benefit for 2010 and 2011, and the property would be fully taxable in 2012. Scenario 2, if the builder begins construction in 2009, the property is 50% on February 1st of 2010. The builder completes and sells the property in June of 2010. The land only would be taxable for 2009. The builder would be exempt on the value of the building as of February 1st for 5 months in 2010. And then a short form abatement process would put the value on the tax roll for 7 months in 2010. Then the buyer would benefit for 2010 and 2011. So the property would have been fully taxable for 7 months in 2010 and again starting in 2012. In scenario 3, the builder begins construction in 2009. The property remains incomplete and unoccupied through 2010 and 2011. Property is 25% finished on February 1st of 2010 and 75% finished on February 1st of 2011. The builder completes the property in the spring of 2012 and sells the property in the fall of 2012. So the land only would be taxable for 2009. The builder would be exempt on the value of the buildings for 2010 and 2011. The exemption would expire in 2011, and the buyer would benefit, the property would go on the tax rolls starting in 2012. The buyer would benefit for 2013 and 2014 because the property was completed in 2012. So the property would have been fully taxable for 2012 and again starting in 2015. And based on these previous scenarios, I have 3 different analyses listed on the loss of revenue to the taxing jurisdictions or savings to the buyer and builder, depending on which way you want to view it. Again, each scenario is based on a home value of $225,000 and the total mill rate from 2008 of 424.75. So the first scenario you have where the builder constructed it in 2009, completed and sold it in October, it's showing you, assuming you have no value cap for the builder and $150,000 for the first buyer, the total amount of tax dollar exemption is going to be $5,734. In the second column, if you assume a maximum of $150 for the builder and $150 for the first buyer, your tax dollars are going to be $5,734. Assuming a maximum of $75,000 for the builder and first buyer in the last column, and that's currently where we're at, the total amount of tax dollar exemption would be $2,866. On the scenario 2, where you have a partial assessment, where the builder was 50% finished, and then it came back on the roll for 7 months, and then the new buyer got the exemption for 2 years. Assuming there's no value cap for the builder and $150,000 for the first buyer, the total amount of exemption would be $6,631. Assuming a maximum of $150,000 for the builder and $150 for the first buyer, you'd be at $6,631. And currently, under the $75,000, it would be $3,763. On scenario, on scenario 3, where the property remained incomplete and unoccupied through 2010 and 2011, and then was prorated and brought on the tax roll and actually went exempt again in 2013 and 2014. The first column, assuming there's no value cap again, and $150,000 for the first buyer, you'd be looking at $10,036. On the, assuming a maximum of $150 for the builder and $150 for the first buyer, you'd be looking at $9,677. And the current $75,000, you'd be looking at $5,732. So to summarize these, the builder's exemption summary, the property has to remain owned by the builder and unoccupied. The number of properties with exemption, that is a change that could be made. The value limit on the exemption, that could be limited. And then this would be for homes where construction began after December 31st of 2008. So that would affect the 2010 taxable year. The buyer's exemption summary, it has to be completed and owned and occupied by the owner for the first time, the 2 taxable years following construction completion, first ownership after builder and occupancy. You can put a value limit on the exemption, and this is also for homes where construction began after December 31st of 2008. Are there any questions?
Okay, Mrs. Zent, thank you. And really, Senate Bill 2247 is essentially what we have today. They just raised the limit from 75,000 to 150 and kind of changed the start time
Correct.
when the exemption starts.
Correct.
2239 is new legislation.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we didn't have a builder's exemption before.
That's correct.
Okay. Comments or questions?
I just have one question, Mr. President. How are the other cities doing this? Have you gotten any response?
I have visited with 3 of them. The other ones are also in the process of just presenting it. You know that the city of Williston, on the builder exemption, they limited the amount of exemption to $75,000. They went to 1 year from the 2 years, and they put a maximum of 10 properties with that proration to date of sale. If one property would sell, then they could not put another one on there. With their first owner exemption, they limited the amount of exemption to $75,000. They limited the time from 2 years to 1 year. And the property has to be owner occupied. They went with no investors. Valley City did the $150,000 for the owners, the property owners, and they did no value cap for the builders. And Jamestown did the first owner $150,000 for 1 year, and the builder no value cap for the 2 years.
For 2 years for the builder?
Correct. Which is what the law states. And that's the only ones I've gotten so far back.
So what this tells me is it's more of an incentive. Actually, the way this was started was an incentive for builders to build properties. So I can see by Williston, they have more of a lot of building going on. That's probably why they opted for the 75, but we don't have to go 75 or 150. It could be like President Johnson said, it could be 100, could be whatever we decide.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Zen, isn't it true that under the old bill, the 2-year exemption could be obtained by either the builder or the owner?
In the old bill, yes.
In the old bill. So really, all the combination of these 2 bills has done is expanded the time frame and the dollar amount.
Correct.
Because
And-
now it can be a 4 or maybe more year exemption. Part of it for the builder, part of it for the owner.
Right. In the old bill, also the townhouse and residential condo property, that just went with the first owner after the builder. The builder did not benefit from that, where now it includes everything as a property owner.
Also, do you know what Stark County is doing or has done?
No, they have not pursued it yet. They usually wait for the city of Dickinson.
I have another question. So say we could also go on a sliding scale, like if you're going to have a $200,000 property, you're not going to want to exempt up to 150. So if you agreed to do that, is that how you'd have to stay, or you could go on a sliding?
No, I'm sure you could go on a sliding scale. And, you know, the only thing that I make comment, you know, as the assessment department, when you're talking about bringing properties on the rolls and off the rolls, you know, it's going to be quite a task to monitor. I guess, you know, is it going to be that much more if you do a sliding scale? I don't know, but it just what I've explained with doing, you know, whatever, 75,000, whatever you use, when you have a builder and a home buyer, and then, you know, you're going to have it on the rolls for 7 months, and then you're going to take it off for 2 more years. And I mean, we're going to, you know, really have to be on top of what's happening there.
I was just thinking because some homes are 350,000, and then you have some that are 200. Every home is different, you know, has a different price, so.
I think you just answered a legal question, Mrs. Zent, I mean, on the question of the sliding scale. I mean, as I read the legislation, I'm not sure I saw that flexibility in there, which in effect would be giving you the ability to exempt on a percentage basis rather than a dollar amount basis. What do you think, Mr. Colon?
Mr. President, Commissioners, the legislation doesn't make reference to either a strict dollar amount or a percentage of value. It states that the city may impose limits or conditions upon the exemption. It doesn't state a particular means by which that needs to be done. So I think if you wanted to do a sliding scale, that would be permissible under the legislation. I understand from Mrs. Zent it may create some administrative difficulties, but it would be permissible.
So you did answer a legal question correctly. Good job. Okay. Other comments or questions? Mr. Kessel, you said you reserved the right to comment. Would you like to exercise that right?
Thank you. President Johnson, Commissioners, obviously this piece of legislation is an important one, not only because it's up to you as a commission to find the balance between the incentive that it can provide and providing an incentive to somebody who's going to do something anyways. That's always a tricky balance to find. I was going to make a comment about the sliding scale that is implemented in other communities based on the old legislation. So that is an option for you. You can base that upon anything you choose to, as long as it falls within the realm of the state law, meaning not just the value of the home or the property that's being built. You could make that based on the income of the buyer, if you so chose. So you have a lot of options that are before you, and creativity, I think, is paramount in something, in this type of resolution. So I just wanted to point those things out so that the proper discussion occurs, because I think this is an important step for the city.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kessel. Other comments?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
are we looking for a resolution one way or the other on this here tonight?
No.
We're not.
I don't believe
Okay,
so. It
good.
was just,
You know, the original tax assessment order, 75,000, and so on, you know, we had a lot of discussion with the home builders and the realtors and so on. And at that time, if I remember, a lot of the discussion from the home builders was that it would give the homeowner more funding to do extra things and so on. You know, I really didn't hear that it would give them the opportunity to take advantage of the exemption or not. It was that they were more doing it for the home buyer. Now, I don't know, I'm not ready to vote either way on this here yet tonight. You know, I'd like to see home builder's recommendation. I'd like to see what the realtor associations have to say. I believe we had a public hearing here for all those there at one time, and there was comments and so on. I would like to see that again on this here, because they're a big part of our community, and you know, it'd give, actually, the public to also come and voice their opinions on it. Also, we heard from people that are not builders and so on at that time too, but I'm just wondering what triggered this in Bismarck for them to come up with this change. I mean,
Well, I believe your home builders did, as a group, propose this.
Builders.
And I know Kyle Kuntz is here with the home builders, and he probably wants to offer some information also, but he agreed to offer it at the following meeting, if, he just wanted to hear on the discussion. But that's where it started, if I'm correct. Yeah, I believe the home builders themselves are the ones that brought this forth.
Yeah, I think in my Wednesday meeting with Mr. Kessel, he indicated that representatives from the home builders would appear before us at the next meeting and present, and Commissioner Steiner, if we could give that same opportunity to representatives from the realtors. I know just before the meeting started, Commissioner Jackson commented to me that on this item that he'd also like to see a public hearing, which I think is an excellent suggestion. I'm assuming our resolution expired April 1st because of the changes made by the legislature, not because we put an expiration date on that.
That's correct, Mr. President, and you still do have a resolution that is still valid. You still can grant up to a $75,000 exemption on newly constructed property. There's nothing in the state legislation that causes a city resolution to expire.
But they did change when it starts, and that's different probably from our resolution, I just assuming. So, I mean, we would have to, at the very least, amend our resolution to cover the new start rules.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So we have to do something with ours. It can be that minor, or it could be quite significant. And I think management is bringing this issue to our attention and to the public, saying, you're going to have to change your resolution to begin with. You have all the way from making a minor change to it, or doing away with it completely, or expanding it fairly greatly here. And so,
Mr. President, I know the North Dakota Association of Realtors did support the $150,000 because it was an option of you could go higher, you could stay where you were, so.
Yeah, and I see there's quite an impressive list of legislators who sponsored the Senate Bill 2247 or signed on as co-sponsors. Mr. Frenzel?
Chairman, I don't question that there's been a significant change in construction costs since this was originally proposed 15 years ago or longer, probably. So there's, I think there's some need to make an adjustment. I think the original legislation, though, was, the intent was to have it, it wasn't designed to apply to speculative construction. It was more designed for the individual who contracts with a builder to build his own home. So that's an area that this is a significant change, I think, from what was originally intended. But I think the increase is justifiable in whether it goes to the 150, I don't know, but there's a significant change in construction costs from when it was originally done to now.
Thank you, Mr. Frenzel. Other comments?
Purpose of this legislation, the old or the new, is to spur the construction of homes in a community. We all want that. It's good for a community. It's good for all residents of a community. I think we have to remember a couple things, though, that we are affecting other taxing entities when we do this. And in that 2 years or 4 years or whatever the time period may be for these exemptions, that somebody else is picking up that property tax as it's being deferred those 2 to 4 years. So I certainly think that the intent of this kind of legislation is good. I really do. But there's probably a happy medium that we need to find somewhere. And I do, personally, I would really like to hear from others with their opinion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson. Other comments?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
just one other comment. Mrs. Zent, currently the 75,000 exemption 2 years is amounting to what for us on the budget?
Tax dollar,
If we're exempting the first 75,000 on the new construction and so on, do you have any idea what that is?
I believe with our mill levy, it's like $1,400. Is that what you're asking? The tax dollar amount?
No, the homes right now,
How many,
under the exemption list, amounts to what amount that we aren't receiving the tax for, the 75,000?
the total amount
Yes.
you're looking on right now?
Yes.
It'd have been about $6 million in valuation, the amount of it.
Okay, in valuation, how much in
Correct.
actual tax, property taxes, are we not getting the first 2 years because of the 75,000 exemption? All right?
In my head, I need a
We
calculator,
didn't have the
sorry.
exempt-
Wouldn't it
Okay,
be roughly 1,400 times 33 houses that we've got?
33,000.
And that's the number of building permits you've taken out so far this year, is 33.
Okay, I'm sorry, and I was using the previous year. We had
Well-
about 82
Yeah.
properties, so at about $6 million,
Times
so
$1,400 is the taxes.
so you're talking about,
Roughly 100,000 if I remember.
Well, if it was $1,500 and it was 80 properties, that's $120,000. And that's just not the city's share, right? That's
total.
total, that would
That's
be
correct.
shared by the school district, the county, and, but it's a significant
So we're
amount of money.
we're 25% of that amount.
Right, the city is. But Commissioner Jackson makes an excellent point, too. Whatever we do, the others are impacted by. I think it's one of those issues that if we were on debate teams and they assigned us either side or the other, you could probably make a pretty effective argument for having it, and you can make a pretty effective argument for not having it. I think it's somewhat situational, and you commented about the situation Williston's in. They have strong demand for housing. They're going to build that housing anyway. You don't need an exemption. If you go back to the situation both Williston and Dickinson were in from the mid-'80s well into the maybe even later '90s, you needed as many incentives as you could to spur home construction. So it's somewhat situational in my view. We could spend a lot of time talking about this. I know I have to be at the Badlands Activity Lighting Ceremony. I need to leave here in about 35 minutes or so. You can certainly carry on without me, but we have plenty of time to discuss this issue, and it was presented as an informational topic today to get you thinking about this. But if it's okay, I would like to move on. If not, we'll stay with this, and when the time comes, I'll move on. So,
President Johnson, should we add a public hearing on this topic for the next commission meeting?
I think Commissioner Jackson's idea there is a good one. I would put the public hearing, though, after you've had your presenters, so the meeting, if next month or next meeting we could have our presenters, then I would say I guess you could do a public hearing then, but I'd even have a full public hearing after we've had those presentations, so people have a chance to digest everything they've heard. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Yes.
Fine.
Thank you.
And you certainly want to, inform the superintendent of schools, Park District, and the county of, the process we're going through, so at these hearings, they could come and comment.
We'll make sure we invite them to the next commission meeting.
Anything else here? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Zent, did a good job. We'll go to tab 7, Public Works, Cemetery Ordinance. Mr. Rapp, This would be the second reading, and is there anything that you wish to present here that's different from what you've already presented?
No, and I understand I don't have the whole 35 minutes either, so.
No, you don't. This
No,
is like a budget
resolution that
meeting.
was presented at the last city commission meeting for first reading. The only change is Mr. Colling did put this in ordinance form, and we were recommending passage of second reading and final passage.
Okay, you've heard Mr. Rapp. I'll just ask if there's anyone in the public that wishes to comment on this proposed ordinance. If so, step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. Anyone from the public? There's no one from the public. Any comments by city staff or other city commissioners? It's been well presented and well discussed in prior meetings. Is there a motion regarding this item?
I'll make a motion to pass the second reading of ordinance 1371.
We have the motion.
Final passage.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have the motion to approve second reading and final passage and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Mr. Rapp, you can continue.
Second item we have on there is approval or awarding of a bid for a new chipper for our forestry department. On August 6th, we did open bids. We had two bidders, RDO Equipment and Swanson Equipment. RDO was not the low bid. However, the other chipper that we looked at did not meet our specifications. We were recommending awarding the bid to RDO in the amount of $29,766.
Could you elaborate more on how the other chipper did not meet the specifications?
We took a look at both the chippers and actually demoed both units. The difference in the chipper from Swanson did not include the sound reduction package, which would have reduced the noise levels around the chipper. They could not provide a safety bar along the bottom of the chipper. We've had an incident a number of years back where we had an employee that actually got pulled up onto the chipper before they could actually reach the safety cutoffs. The bottom bump bar, as it's called, would allow an employee or an individual operating that chipper to deactivate that if they bump the front edge of the chipper. The other unit basically had the same type of SIPs too, where you have to have grab cables that are inside or are close to the chute. So that was another area that did not meet the specifications. We looked at a larger drum, which provides more efficiency in chipping wood and stuff too. That unit did not have the same size drum requirements, and then we looked for a deluxe instrumentation package. We included a tachometer, oil pressure gauge, water temperature gauge, and basically had a cover to protect those gauges for. The unit from Swanson did not have that additional items.
And these four items, sound reduction, the safety bar, the drum size, and the instrumentation package were part of the specifications?
Yes.
Any other questions? Hearing none, you've heard the recommendation. What would you like to do?
I'll move the approval of the bid from RDO Equipment for $29,766.
Second.
We have the motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote on the motion. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rapp. Go to City Administrator's Report. Mr. Kessel?
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson, President Johnson, Commissioners. The first item that I have before you tonight is the liquor license compliance check results. On August 8th of 2009, School Resource Officer Van Dorn and the Coalition of Safe Communities conducted an alcohol compliance check. 18 businesses were checked, and 13 of those businesses passed. Of the 5 that did not pass, there were 2 that did not pass a previous alcohol compliance check. According to our ordinance, 2 non-passes means that they have to come before you as a city commission. The 2 that did not pass this 2 times in 24 months is Ponderosa Liquors and El Sombrero. They have both been sent a letter and asked to attend the September 21st commission meeting so that you can conduct a violations hearing. Our ordinance does indicate that a second violation is a 1-day suspension of their liquor license a $1,000 fine and a hearing before this body. So you have the discretion to choose the day in which they must serve their suspension, and then you can hear their perspective on the alcohol compliance checks.
So we'd be doing this at the next meeting, I assume?
Correct.
Okay.
The next item that I have before you is a post-tornado housing survey. This housing survey was conducted to ascertain more information regarding the residents located on the south side or affected by the tornado. It was, you could fill this out either online in electronic format, or you could do so in a printed document. And we received 126 responses out of the 800. The return rate is decent. And the highlights of the survey included a few things. The first one is, the question was asked, where are you today? Assuming that many people lost their residence completely, especially those in apartments. There were over 30 units of apartments that simply didn't exist after the storm. And all of those people who are living either outside of the community or in dwellings within the community but not permanent, all said they would return to the city of Dickinson and intend to stay. That's a very positive comment, and one that I found heartening. There were also, during the course of the survey completion, we became aware, as these surveys were completed, of situations that were not healthy or safe. And I can assure you that every time we did come across a situation like that, it was addressed and assistance was provided. Now, two of those situations were a person living in their vehicle after the tornado. This was found out during the survey, which was just conducted about 3 weeks ago. So that means they were living in their vehicle for quite some time. And also of another instance where there was a family of 3 living in a tent at Patterson Lake. And that situation also resolved itself. So in that regard, the survey was successful, just to help those people out. The other issues that continue and remain are more difficult for the city of Dickinson to address, and that is insurance issues. There are excellent examples of insurance companies that have really done the right thing and stepped up to the plate. But of course, there are examples where that hasn't occurred, and people are still continuing to battle with their insurance company to obtain coverages in which they think they should receive coverage, and their insurance thinks otherwise, or thinks it's a lower amount than they should be covered for. There were all of the instances where there was differences of opinion between the homeowner and the insured, or in the insurance company, have been brought to the attention of the insurance department at the state. As you recall, Insurance Commissioner Adam Ham was present in Dickinson during the tornado event and indicated that he would like to work with us as best we can. So, his staff has done a nice job of addressing most of those concerns. The other is finding contractors and reputable contractors to complete the work. As you know, the building in the city of Dickinson was going on quite well. Our contractors, well, let's just say, weren't starving. They were booked, and finding additional contractors to come to our community is needed in order to complete these repairs timely. The concern, of course, is that the recent 90-degree weather isn't going to last for a few more months, and people need to have their homes, at least the shell of their homes, completed, meaning doors, windows, and roofs. In order to help with this situation, the RAFT organization is trying to put together a date in October where contractors and volunteers from other communities will volunteer their time and complete things like window installation, new door installation, maybe some roofing if required. So a list of active repairs that need to be done is being compiled, and what's included in the survey, which will be then shared with the RAFT volunteers. So there's not been a date set, but it's expected to be in that second or third week of October. Also, the unmet needs application deadline has been extended to September 11th, and anybody who is interested in applying or needs to should obtain those applications here at City Hall or there, or at the Chamber of Commerce, and get those to RAFT so that they can be considered for those funds. I have included the full survey for you to review in your packets, and if there's any questions, I'll certainly try to address them now.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Any comments or questions for the city administrator? Do we know anything in terms of potential replacement of the apartment buildings that were lost in the tornado?
There's one complex down there that had 30 units, 4 different buildings, but 30 units. That ownership of that complex has since changed post-tornado. It is now being owned by a local, two local owners. They are searching for another property because that property was rezoned, and R3 zoning, which is required for multiple dwellings like that, is no longer allowed. So they're searching for other places within the community to erect Section 8 housing. We've been working with the new owners and have identified a couple different city lots that they can express an interest in, and for one of those lots, we're talking about a land swap for the current land on the south side for one of the parcels, and a second, we're looking at a land sale. The owners would like, there was 30 units particularly that were affected, and they're looking at building up to 50 units to replace those 30. Not all may be Section 8 housing or low-income housing. There may be some market additions to that. So we're working through that, and hopefully we'll have something before this body in the not-too-distant future.
Okay. And then, Mr. Colling, at the previous meeting, Mrs. Miller was here and talked about us doing something special for properties that were destroyed or severely damaged in the tornado, and it was special in the sense of tax exemptions, things like that. You were going to do a little research. Have you had an opportunity to do that, John?
I have. I've looked into the tax abatement issue that she raised of, so I understand that she was looking at seeing whether the city could abate taxes for up to 2 to 3 years for properties that were damaged in the tornado. There isn't a vehicle under state law that would enable us to do that. Unfortunately, the Board of Equalization has to certify that all the properties are within certain tolerances, taxed within certain tolerances of their full and true value for each tax year. And when a tax abatement is applied for, it only applies to the current tax year. So once a property has been remodeled or repairs have been completed, then the value of the property is what it is, and the Board of Equalization is obligated to tax that property according to its full and true value for the current tax year. So there just isn't a vehicle under state law that would enable us to extend an abatement out more than for 1 year.
Thank you, Mr. Colling. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Kessel?
I have one more update for you on the museum.
Yes.
The museum has been closed due to some water issues. The ductwork that's currently present at the museum is below grade, and we have not been able to completely eliminate water infiltration in that ductwork. We are now looking at filling in those ducts and erecting them above grade so that we don't have to worry about this issue long-term. That means that there's some changes that will have to be made. We've received a bid for those changes and hope to award a bid and have those changes made, and so we can get that museum opened within the next couple weeks.
Any updates on the Baylor building?
That Baylor building continues to, there's $70,000 in damage on the garage doors. They are seeking to another bid for those structures. They think they can lower that amount. The crane that's present has also had damage due to the heat that was present, and we're looking at about a Total cost approximately of $200,000 in damage, complete damages that would have to be repaired. The painting has been complete and the cleaning has been completed, but there continues to be other issues that we're pursuing.
And insurance will cover how much?
The insurance should cover all except the, our deductible, yes.
Any other comments or questions? I have one suggestion for the city, and I started thinking about this at our last budget meeting. There was a handout that we didn't discuss, but there was a handout that listed a number of cities and then listed like their water rates and their solid waste rates and things like that. And then today we had a question regarding, tax exemptions. What do other cities do? And one of the things that's common in larger businesses, especially publicly held businesses, is that they have a peer group. They establish a peer group, and then many times, that whether it's officer compensation or financial performance or whatever it might be, you compare to that peer group. And I got to thinking that I think perhaps we should have a peer group, because we kind of do this all the time. We ask what other cities are doing, and we kind of want to know what the bigger four are doing. And then, of course, there's another group that would be close to the same size as Dickinson, and we kind of like to know what they're doing. And it might be valuable and in the long run be quite efficient for city staff if you selected a peer group of, say, no more than about 10 cities, include the big four plus 5 or 6 that are relatively the same size as Dickinson, and then we just periodically report on things, how we compare, whether it be in mill levies or the cost of sewer disposal, salaries, that kind of thing. And so I would just suggest that maybe you consider doing that, and I think in the long run it would streamline the process. It could be something that eventually, as we develop more and more, that you just include it in the budget book.
Good suggestion.
Well, all the mayor's suggestions are good suggestions, right?
That's correct.
Not all the time, no, but it's just something I thought about, so. Okay, tab 9, accounts payable and payroll. Are there any of the accounts payable and payroll that you'd like to discuss?
I'll move for approval, Mr. President.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Are there any comments by city commissioners?
Mr. President, I just have a few. In the last couple of weeks, I've been getting a lot of complaints about neighbors not cleaning their yards, cutting their grass, or parking their vehicles on their lawns. It's basically a site thing, and devaluing your properties is how they state it. And the other thing is, the new property owners that are getting their yards completed now are having a problem finding trees to plant. And I'm going to have Skip help me out on this forestry thing. The trees that are recommended are very expensive, and they can't find them this time of the year either. And we're wondering if we could change that. I know Sean Soren had told me that we went from 2-inch to 1.5, right? So I'm wondering who we would, or how we contact them to change it again, or can you help me out on that?
Yes, Commissioner Dukart, we actually have kind of somewhat two different scenarios to do. The code enforcement does have rules and regulations in the property maintenance code, I believe, that requires that they have to have one tree for every 500 square feet. The code ordinance does have the requirement, the 2-inch caliper. Those are almost impossible to find, and then we did go down to 1.5-inch. I have been visiting with Mr. Soren about looking at some possible scenarios and changes to that, especially in ornamentals and stuff too. It's very difficult to even find 1.5-inch caliper trees and then looking at somewhat of a sliding scale too, where we allow smaller trees, put a height requirement on them, because a 3/4 inch caliper tree might, in an ornamental, might be 6, 7 feet tall, where an 1.5 inch caliper bur oak might only be 6, 7 feet tall. So there's some things we can do to adjust that to make it a little bit better, and then also looking at possibly if some of the larger trees going up to 750 square feet. So Mr. Soren and I have had those discussions, and those are things that are going to have to work hand in hand with forestry. We have done updates to our kind of tree guide that is kind of the general guide for property owners to be able to plant on public right-of-way and stuff, too, to include, different zones, if their boulevards are less than 3 feet or 6 feet or more, what can be planted within those areas. But late in the year, that is an issue and stuff, too, because most of the nursery stock is gone by this time of year. So I know the one gentleman that you talked to and stuff, too, he is going to be looking at planting in the spring.
So just for the public now, the ones that cannot get the trees this year, they just have to come down and fill out a paper because they're worried about getting fines because their year is going to be up, and so they just fill out a paper and...
Commissioner Dukart, from our standpoint, the only thing we deal with on a permit-wise is if it's on public right-of-way. The rest of the requirements go through code enforcement as far as what has to be planted within that front yard areas and stuff on it. But I don't believe, even the code enforcement side of it, they would fine anybody for not having the trees planted this year.
Okay.
And Mr. Soren could basically probably elaborate a little bit more on that.
Well, the only elaboration, the trees are a requirement as part of the permit on a new house, and we'd probably keep the permit open until we were satisfied, but we work with homeowners all the time on the availability of trees and products to complete projects. So if they couldn't get the product this year and they told us they were going to fix it in the spring, we would certainly work with the homeowner on doing that.
Okay.
Our
'cause-
goal is to get trees in the ground and keep the ground beautified and going forward, not necessarily to put people at hardships. It's to get a nice end product.
And they do have the option of putting it in their yard or the boulevard. That's what one of the builders told me today, is that correct?
If they go on the boulevard, they work with Mr. Rapp and doing that. Our requirement states how many trees they have to have with the front yard required landscape area, which is the 1 tree per 500 square feet. Our interest is that we keep those in the front of the house, whether they're boulevard or in the yard. We work through that, yes.
All right. Hopefully-
What about the issue of not taking care of the yard? If a citizen is concerned about a neighbor that's not taking care of the yard, who do they contact at the city to state their concerns?
They can go onto the city's website and go through our WebQA, which is an online, I don't want to call it complaint, but online information process where they can provide that information, or if they just call the front desk, Leonard that works with Mr. Soren takes care of sending the letters out, gives them basically, I think, 14 days to clean up the property or mow it. If it's not done within that time frame, then Mr. Schwint works with our crews and stuff too, and they will go out and either clean the property up or mow it, and then the property owner is charged.
Okay,
For that.
so, but I mean, it's just as simple as calling the front desk and identifying the property and what the issue is, and then the city will check it out and take whatever the proper action is.
Correct.
Okay.
You might want to tell them what the cost is too, because they don't understand that if the city does it, it's a lot more expensive than if they themselves hire someone to do it.
Yeah, Commissioner Dukart, our current fee, if we end up having a crew go out to mow the lawns and stuff, it's $150 an hour.
And you tell them that in the letter, don't you, when you,
Yes.
yes,
we do.
so, yeah. Okay. And on the issue regarding tree height, Chief Rummel and I are philosophically against any height limitations, okay? So, just so you know.
The other one stuff, that's just small nursery stock.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rapp. Other issues by city commissioners? If not, are there anyone from the public that wishes to address the commission? If so, step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. There's no one from the public that wishes to address the commission. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
The motion